Hi, you're watching Hindustan Times. A day after Diwali, and Delhi is once again gasping for breath, literally. It's an annual ritual, and with us today we have once again Sukumar Ranganathan, the editor-in-chief of the paper. Welcome, Sukumar, to the show. Sukumar, this is an annual ritual that happens every year. Air quality worsens. And this time it's actually touched even the severe level at various points across Delhi and the NCR. We know that this is not just due to firecrackers burning, but a major contribution has come from firecrackers burning because the difference between yesterday and today is remarkable. The ban on firecrackers clearly did not work.
Yes, the ban didn't work, but I think there's a larger point, and you alluded to it. So I think it's very important to understand why Delhi's air is bad, right? And I think the unfortunate thing is, I don't think people have thought about this scientifically enough. And because if you think about it scientifically, there are things that you need to do. Delhi has a huge problem, as we know. I mean, we both, I woke up in the morning and I couldn't breathe, right? I mean, it was pretty bad. And your eyes burn.
My eyes are still watering from driving all the way,
And so you have to understand why this happens. The first one is location. Delhi is located at the head of the plains and at the eastern edge of a desert, right? Which results in significant problems. Why? Because as the temperatures cool, pollutants continue to remain at the lower level of the atmosphere, creating a smog-like phenomenon, or creating smog. I mean, what is smog like? It is smog. And because of the presence of the desert, as the winds blow, road dust comes in. Road dust is a huge contribution of pollution in Delhi. For the past 20-25 years, the whole NCR has been pretty much a construction zone, whether it's because of the metro or because of the big development that happened in Gurugram or Noida and Indirapuram and things like that. And then you have the transient contributors, as I'd like to call them. And there are two transient contributors. One of them is the farm fires, stubble burning, which contributes to pollution for, let's say, a few weeks to a month and a half kind of thing. And then you have things like Diwali. Now, the thing you have to know about all forms of pollution is everything is transient. Right, and the reason it's transient is because as the winds pick up, there's every opportunity for the pollutants to get flushed away. Mm-hmm. It's the kind of thing from which, let's say, a city like Chennai benefits from hugely because of the sea breeze.
Sure.
So the air quality in Chennai, where again people burst a lot of crackers, and I'm sure I have not looked at the data, but today must be quite bad in Chennai. But because the sea breeze typically picks up in the second half of the day, gets
carried off,
flushed away, and benefits from that. Whereas Delhi does not, because of its location, as I told you, in the bowl, temperatures at this time of the year being lower, and things like that. So what happens in Delhi is that, and we've studied this, I mean, Hindustan Times has looked at it in great detail, is that through the year, the air quality is not great. During the monsoon, of course, it's brilliant, but you leave the monsoon aside, but the air quality is not good at any other time of the year. It's middling bad, right? Moderate or something. And then you have these artificial situations that come up. Farm fires, man-made situations, farm fires, firecrackers, and it spikes. So what happens is that these things worsen an already existing situation which is bad. They just exacerbate things. So you have to address both. You have to look at the short-term things,
as well as
you also have to look at the long-term things. And I think that's where the real difficulty is happening.
So because from what we see and hear, the major part of the efforts of raising awareness, etc., is going on these short-term things. Because for most people right now, pollution becomes a factor pollution becomes a factor which is caused by stubble burning or by burning firecrackers. But what you're saying is that is not the only thing, that it is an all the year round thing.
Sure.
How should the government, what should the government, is the government doing enough to address the long-term issues? Short-term, yes, there are lots of ads, there are lots of hoardings, there are lots of politically motivated people who will come out and say a lot of things. Don't burn crackers, or burn crackers, one way or the other, whichever side of the spectrum you hail from. But the long-term things, what is the government doing towards that? And then we will come to the short-term
Yeah,
things.
great. First of all, there's a caveat. I think the short-term measures are equally important.
Absolutely.
It's not that I think they're not important. So I think the short-term measures are equally
Absolutely.
important. The focus on firecrackers, the focus on farm
Stubble
fires,
burnings,
stubble
yeah.
burning, equally important. But I think this is a problem that you will solve only if you look at the long-term issues. Now, the long-term issues have long-term solutions. How are you going to stop road dust? How are you going to make sure that all construction activity in the city is green or relatively green? How are you going to ensure that there is no burning of garbage? Another significant contributor of pollution in and around Delhi, right? I mean, you have to really start thinking in terms of all these. You also have to ensure that there are longer term measures. For instance, the Aravallis used to be a huge protection
Green,
for Delhi from the desert, right? I mean, they're between Delhi and the sands of Rajasthan, so to say. I'm speaking roughly geographically.
Yeah.
So the winds just don't blow as much, couldn't blow as much dust simply because there was this range in between. But they've been eroded. Mining has carried on there. Some of the mining is legal. Worse still, some of the mining is actually illegal. So you've done all those. So you have to address, construction is carrying on in the Aravalli. So you have to address all those issues. And at the same time, you also have to look at the short-term measures. So long-term, are we doing all these things? Clearly not. Because if you look at the trend line of air quality, and let's say you take a 5-year measure, it hasn't shown a great change other than for artificial things like the pandemic, which obviously made the air quality transiently better. During the lockdown, no one was around, right? So things were better. Vehicular traffic, for instance, vehicular emissions are again a significant portion. Now, unfortunately, and again, the data shows this, I'm not just plucking this out of the air, the data shows this, since the pandemic has sort of ebbed and activities have returned almost to normal,
Right.
vehicular traffic has gone up, and in some cases, in some areas, it's higher than pre-pandemic levels. Why is it higher than pre-pandemic levels? People are worried to take public transport. So everyone is driving around in cars. There's been a spike in the demand for second-hand vehicles.
Right.
There are so you just there's more traffic. So what are you going to do to address all these long-term causes of bad air in this region? And obviously, you need to also have short-term measures. Now the thing is, I think it's easier for people to focus on the short term because these are event-based.
Yes, so you do it now.
Yeah,
and you do it
and you can
quickly.
say like, oh, look, farm fires, oh, look, crackers. And sure, these are issues, you need to address them. But you also need to look at the longer term issues. I want to make another point here. You know, the unfortunate thing is there are people who say, you can't stop us from burning crackers, you first address the other issues, which too, I think, is a pretty wrong kind of argument to have. What they're saying is right. Yes, there are longer term issues that need to be addressed, but it's not as if crackers are good for your health.
Correct.
They do cause emissions. And while these emissions may be transient, today's pollution, today's bad air in Delhi, a huge contributor is the farm fires, because yesterday the farm fires peaked.
Absolutely.
And we've been writing about this over the last 2 weeks, that because of the delayed monsoon, this year the farm fires in Diwali will coincide, creating a huge problem for Delhi. And unfortunately, it's come true. It's one story that I wish we'd gotten wrong, because we all want cleaner air.
Yeah.
But we got it right. And farm fires are a big contributor, but things would not have been as worse as they are if not for the crackers.
Right.
Right?
So clearly, the ban on crackers has not worked.
Has not
the
worked.
ban on stubble burning, the awareness that people are trying to create for both these transient issues has not worked. What do you think are possible solutions, both for stubble burning, and I'm talking now short term here, and for firecrackers in Delhi? I mean, is there an alternative that you could look at beyond banning, because that has not worked in both cases?
Yeah, see, I think for stubble burning, you need to again look at the macro scenario when it comes to agriculture, when it comes to cropping patterns. What kind of crops does Haryana grow? What kind of crops does Punjab grow? Right. Why do they have as many cycles as they do? Why is their cropping pattern following a certain calendar? It turns out that in Punjab, it follows a certain calendar because years of overuse of water for growing rice, basmati, targeted at the export market, has meant that the water table has gone low
down.
and that the government releases water for irrigation only on a certain date, necessitating a certain calendar to the rice growing through the year.
Pattern, yeah.
And when you do that, and you want to make a quick buck with an intermediate crop in a season, the easiest way to get rid of your stubble is by burning it. So are there longer term measures you can look at? The short term measures are clearly punitive. You're going to fine people, you're going to arrest people. Doesn't seem to be having any impact, right? This year, I think they've also been a little lax on regulation because of the farm protests. And the elections are due in Punjab next year. And I have not heard anyone criticizing the farmers for the farm fires. No one in Punjab is criticizing it. No, even the Delhi government is not criticizing the farmers for it because
they need the votes.
There are elections in Punjab and all these people are players in that market. So it's not happening. So you need to look at longer term measures even for addressing issues like stubble burning. You do all this, and crackers, I think it's simply a matter of sensitizing people, educating people, and enforcing bans much more rigorously. I personally think Delhi police has covered itself in glory in the way they've managed this whole thing, right? I mean, the enforcement of it has been pretty poor, and I think given the extent to which people have been bursting crackers, and we all heard it yesterday.
Yeah.
Clearly, had there been enough patrolling by the police to ensure that the ban was enforced, it would have been great. But didn't do it.
So no, it was not just Delhi. It was Gurgaon. It was Faridabad. I mean, there were mega, firecrackers. The bunch of them being burnt together, and there was a lot of hue and cry on social media about it. And a lot of that is definitely happening. That the punitive action is not as rigorous as we would like it to be.
But monitoring. But like I said, you have to address all these problems together. You have to look at the long term. You have to look at the short term. I don't think enough of that is happening.
All right. I hope the powers that we are listening and they are understanding that just telling people don't burn firecrackers, that's not going to cut it. That has not cut it.
But they should tell them not to burn.
But that has to be accompanied by other measures, according to Sukumar here and according to a lot of experts that we have been speaking to. But thank you so much for joining us for this broadcast. I hope that somebody is listening up there and we can hope for a cleaner, more breathable day after Diwali next year. Thank you so much for joining us.